All right, Dr. Byra, thank you very much for joining us from about 25 feet away from my office right now. In times of COVID, thanks for coming on Zoom and recording this quick little interview. I'm not sure if all of our students understand, but you actually are the editor-in-chief for a major PE journal, right?
Yes. So I'm with the Journal of Teaching and Physical Education, and just to give you a perspective of the level of journal, it is based in North America, but there are 3 pedagogy journals in the world that are in tier 1 of our journals, so top tier journals. And JTPE, which is Journal of Teaching and Physical Education, I'll use JTPE. So JTPE is one of those 3 that are in the top tier. Really well recognized journal, a very low acceptance rate, meaning that we accept probably around 10% of manuscripts that are submitted.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
Yeah, and it's been around since the early 1970s, actually. So it's been around for quite a while. It has a impact factor currently, just in the last couple of years, it's gone up, and it currently is like at 1.77, somewhere in that neighborhood, which is pretty good for a journal in our area.
I mean, you think of New England Journal of Medicine with impact factor like 35. For people who don't understand this, impact factor basically tells people who aren't familiar with the journal how frequently do articles from that journal get cited elsewhere or within that journal itself. So what it tells you is basically the reach of the journal. But you have to take into account that for a topic like medicine, the reach of those is pretty big. We're writing a lot of articles about medicine per year, about physical education teaching. So to have an impact factor of 1.7 with a narrow field like that is really impressive.
Yeah, and with the other 2 well-known journals in physical education teaching, their impact factors are approximately the same. Okay. It doesn't vary a whole lot. So
right. So what I want you to do is, the whole purpose of today, whole purpose of today's lecture is just to let our students know if they're submitting a manuscript overall, the first person who sees that manuscript is you. Nope.
Cutting out a little bit here, Evan.
Sorry, I got you there. So you're the first person to see that manuscript when it gets sent in, correct?
Yes. So,
and then what is your general job then?
Okay. So as we have an editor-in-chief, and that's what I am right now, and we have a incoming editor-in-chief, and which is what I was a number of years back. It's a 4-year term, so I'm just kind of finishing up my editor-in-chief. So both the co-editors, we call them, Brian and I, the other editor, we're based through Human Kinetics. That is our publishing company that we're with.
That's the umbrella company above you.
Which many journals in kinesiology and physical education are under that umbrella. So the folks in Human Kinetics, the person who works with us there, she will divvy up manuscripts across Brian and I. So any new manuscript that comes in, it either gets sent to me or the next one gets sent to Brian, and we go like a 50-50 share on that. And we, in a year's time, over the last few years, we've had about 350 submissions per year. That's what we average. We have the other structure within there are the 2 co-editors, and then we have 5 associate editors. So as co-editors, we receive a manuscript, we will look at it, get just a general read on it, and make a decision whether in fact it should go out for review, in which case we would assign it to one of the associate editors, and that associate editor then invites reviewers for it and so forth. Or our other decision could be we reject it without having it sent out for review. if we reject it without having it sent out for review, that typically means, or a couple of the reasons why that would occur. Number one would be just the quality of the research methods and so forth would just not be up to snuff, wouldn't be acceptable. And you can, as an editor, you pick those things out pretty quickly as you do a read of it. It could be that the submitters did not go to the website and take a look at what the mission or the purpose of JTPE is. And
it doesn't fit the scope of the journal.
Correct. Yeah, they don't understand that. They just think, oh, well, it's physical education, so they send it in. And some examples of manuscripts that get sent our way are ones that are more specific to motor development or motor control, motor behavior, sometimes biomechanics even.
Right.
And that they're obviously related to human movement, but in JTPE, it's human movement within, we're looking at physical education as it's delivered in some kind of a school setting. So it has to have that connection. So if someone sends us one in and I reject it on the manuscript not meeting our purpose or our mission or our scope, that means that the authors or whoever the submitting author was obviously didn't spend much time going to the website to take a look at what it is.
Yeah,
and that is critical.
So I wanted you to kind of expand on this a little bit. I harped on this in my lecture that I just gave about the importance of looking at those author guideline documents.
Yeah, and number one, you want to look at the mission of the journal to make sure that your submission falls within the scope of that particular journal. And if it does, or you think it does, then you need to look at the author guidelines. And all of this information is on the website for any journal, and they pretty explicitly state what the author guidelines are in terms of the type of writing style, whether it's APA or some other. They'll stipulate that. They will provide guidelines for how they want abstracts presented in the manuscript, the type of as simple as the type of font and so forth, stuff like that. So for any journal, there are some very explicit directions, guidelines for authors, and you have to look through them. And it's not rocket science. It's just taking a look at it and saying, okay, this is what I have to follow. And now I use those guidelines to construct my own manuscript that I'm going to be submitting.
So if you're telling your students, hey, you're going to submit to this journal, when do you want them to do this in reference to writing the paper? Before, during, after?
I think it's if we talk about a graduate student working
right.
with a mentor, with a faculty member, I think a discussion should happen beforehand, at least initially, so that the student's mentor can start talking about, okay, here's the area that we are producing a manuscript for. Now here are a series of journals that might be ones that you earmark to actually send it out to. And here are some advantages of sending it out to journal A versus B versus C and so forth. So I think it's excellent to have that discussion to begin with. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to finalize where you're going to send it out to begin with, but you actually at least have an idea. And then you go visit the websites to verify whether in fact, okay, this manuscript is going to, or I can construct it following the guidelines and it falls within the scope of that particular journal.
Yeah, the person I think about all the time with this would be, Dr. Reddy and some of his qualitative data. The papers he writes with that are going to be really long, but they're in the field of sports science. So let's say he chose medicine, science, sports, and exercise, which I know has like a 3,000 word limit. There's no way he can go there. It might fit the scope of the journal, but because of the types of analyses that he does, the richness of that data overall, he's going to read those author guidelines and go, it's a good journal. We fit the scope, but the format of my article just doesn't work for this, so I'm not going to choose this journal.
Yeah, great point. And JTPE is pretty pretty expansive in the sense that we have probably half of our publications are fall under the category of qualitative research, and about 50% fall under quantitative. So we have a pretty decent page limit. It's actually 28 pages. I don't actually even, if I have a submission around 30 pages, I don't really say much. We eventually, if it's a manuscript that has some opportunity for publication and we start going through the process of reviewing it, at some point I will make a comment that, go through it and let's reduce it some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I want to keep this, relatively focused overall, because we could probably talk about all your different job duties, like, for an entire lesson. But the main thing I want the students to take away from this is, what are the things that you see authors do that when you get it as an editor, you go, oh, okay, this looks pretty good?
There's number one, in my initial perusal, I would call it, reading it, but not, reading it pretty quickly to figure out whether it should go out for review or not. Number one, I will kind of look at the literature review and the research methods to see how aligned things are, whether there is some real match between what the authors are proposing and then the methods that are being utilized. And then I will go to the methods section to get a sense of, yeah, these seem to be reasonable. These are the methodologies that I would expect to see, the statistical analyses that I would expect to see. I don't spend a whole lot of time looking at that, but I just verify whether the authors are right there with that, they're correct. And then I will, continue on, take a look at the results and discussion, and not in a whole lot of detail. But so my first perusal of it is to verify that, yes, this is a manuscript that fits the breadth of our journal. It fits what we publish. From a research perspective, research methodologies, pretty sound. I then look at it, and I always, basically, I'm doing this simultaneously in the read, but I look at it in terms of the guidelines that we have for them to follow, whether they're following APA style of writing, the headings that are used correctly, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, I'm also reading it for clarity of writing. We have, for our journal, and most journals I would argue would be the same, we have about almost 50% of our submissions come from authors that do not have English as a first language.
Right.
Okay, so it's coming from all over the world. So an editor has to recognize that. And it's, are they writing clear enough, and have they chosen methodologically the appropriate processes to follow? And then are they presenting it clear enough that a reviewer can, at least get a sense of it? Because sometimes, well, not sometimes, many times, those who don't have English as the first language, man, there's a lot of corrections that need to be done that are about writing style.
Right.
And one of the things I do, and I would argue that probably not a hell of a lot of co-editors do this, but if I see that it is a methodologically sound study that has been conducted, some really good alignment between the theoretical framework and the results and so forth, but it is coming probably from someone who doesn't have English as their first language, I will actually do a pretty thorough review of that manuscript. And when I say a thorough review, I'm going to send this paper back with probably 8 to 10 pages of things about writing to change.
Gee.
And I only do that if it's a methodologically sound paper. Yeah. And so it doesn't go to review, but I do a pretty thorough review just on the writing. Fire it back out to the authors and say, hey, I'm not sending this out for review, but it's a good paper and you got to deal with my comments here.
Well,
And if you
so
want to do that, resubmit it, great.
yeah, I mean, you're probably one in a million editors who do that. So we don't want to give our class
No.
members here false hope. Don't expect the editor to do this for you. And so what I
Yeah.
would recommend is make sure you proofread. Don't have mismatched verb tenses all over the place. Those are a great way to get your editor to think, this is not for our journal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And an example of that, Evan, would be if I see that in fact the authors are from English speaking country and I start seeing some of those errors, there's no way I'm going to spend, I'm just going to send it back and say, hey, you got to clean it up.
Sorry to hear about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's flip the script. We talked about some things that you really like to see. What are some things that have immediately, outside of that grammar that you just talked about, what are some things that have immediately caused you to be like, nope, this is immediate desk reject right now?
If I see things within the methods section that are not in detail, for example, if you're doing qualitative research, you've got to talk about the processes involved in doing qualitative research. And there's, key parts to that. And if I don't see some of those elements, it's a reject. If it's an intervention study, meaning that there's a treatment that has gone on, in a school setting, maybe they're looking at a particular instructional model for that's been implemented for a 3-week period of time. If they haven't provided detailed information about what that intervention is, and then followed up with verifying that that intervention took place, I'll send it back. We can't do it, because if we don't know whether the intervention took place, how can we believe the results? We can't. We don't know.
Yeah.
They may be good, but we don't know. So
Right.
things like that will pretty much be a return quickly, an automatic return without review, in other words.
Yeah, I think me and one of my PhD colleagues have the world record for fastest desk reject. We submitted a paper on a Thursday. I can still remember sitting next to her, and we submitted it. We were all happy. It was a study we did, and we got a response in 13 minutes with a rejection. So my kind of final question for you is, what's your advice to graduate students who get a paper rejected? What should they do?
Well, first of all, you should expect from a good journal, if it's a reject, and it's a reject, it's
not a revise and resubmit.
Okay. So yeah. if it's an automatic reject,
and not an automatic, maybe it went through review, but then it came back and got rejected.
So let's look at that scenario. So I looked at it and I said, yep, it's good. This one's going to go out for review. It goes out for review, and it's going to be reviewed by 2 different people. And one person says major revision, other person says reject, which I, as the editor, might say reject. A good journal, those reviews are going to be incredibly helpful for you as a researcher. They're going to be very specific to things that you need to improve. In some cases, you can make those improvements because it's not necessarily a methodological flaw that has occurred. Maybe you just used the wrong statistical analysis, or they suggest a better analysis to use. So you could actually, the study's okay, but you have to reanalyze it in a different way. Sometimes there are methodological flaws, which will then tell the researchers, next time around, say, hey, you got to think about this as you design your next piece of research for this.
Yeah.
So it's really good stuff from most journals, I would argue. Now, when you receive it, when you receive a rejection as a author, and it comes through and you're looking at it on your computer,
and you're just like super bummed out, you're just like,
yeah, take 2 minutes and look at it and shut it down. Don't look at it again. Leave it, because you're automatically pissed off. You're not happy. So when you're not happy, you're not going to be able to read the comments and from the perspective that you really need to. It's not going to be very meaningful for you. So look at it briefly, put it away. Just leave it for a day, if not longer. Depends how one is. If you can get over it pretty quickly, just put it away for a couple hours or a day, then go look at in detail. So what did the reviewers say? And start looking at it. And then you're going to actually be in a frame of mind to say, now I see where I could have done better, or a change that I could have done. Don't spend time looking at it immediately, at a rejected one, because it's just tough. You just don't see stuff.
Exactly. That's what happened to me with my very first paper, my master's thesis. I sent it out while it was in review. It went through a first round of review. We did the revisions. Between that point and when I put my next version in, they had a change in their editorial board that had a completely different mentality for what they thought peer review was, with a angle towards statistics. And so they asked us, after that first review, we sent our thing back in, and the second revisions that came back to us was like twice as long, asking us to completely redo our statistics. So we did it, sent a second version back. This is the third version we're sending now. Okay. It goes through review again, rejected. When I got that back, I was like crushed. I had sent in 3 different versions, redone all of my statistics, and I didn't look at it for 6 months. I was so upset from that. But you know what? After 6 months, I got it back out and read the comments and was like, you know what? They're right. I do need to do this. And the next time we submitted it, I think we went through 1 round of pretty minimal revisions, and it got accepted. And Dr. Schmidt actually had a statement that I thought was like one of the best statements. She talked about her mentor would say, if it gets rejected or a person has a comment about it, you might disagree with them, but obviously you didn't write it good enough. If there's questions and their questions are like misinterpreting your data, well, then you didn't write it clearly enough. So I think that's important for people to remember.
Yeah. And always remember, particularly as a young researcher, a graduate student coming into this for the first time or second time or whatever, Evan, yourself, myself, every one of us have been rejected, multiple times probably over the years. So it's not like you only get rejected at the beginning of your career. It continues through. And certainly as you get better, the number of rejections will go down, no doubt about it, because you're just a better researcher and you know how to design research studies a lot better than what you did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So this happens to everybody in the business.
All right, Mark, I really appreciate your time. Any last parting words of wisdom for our students from the editor's kind of viewpoint, or from just the educator's viewpoint?
Just that I would, if you're working with your advisor, your mentor, and your mentor thinks it's a decent study, I would reach high. In other words, I would send it to a second tier or a top tier journal, understanding that it's probably going to be rejected, but you're going to get some great comments for revisions to make changes to it. I'd rather see you do that than send it to a third or a fourth tier journal, which accepts
Bob's
a lot of things.
Science.
Yeah, that people don't probably read very much, and it gets published. It's just, it's a publication, but it's just not a very valuable one. So reach high to begin with, and then understand how you can use the comments that come back and to improve things.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece that I took away from the first part of my career as well was, those reviewers are not your enemy. All those videos out there that talk about, reviewer number 2, they didn't get it, all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, that's trying to make your paper better. And that's the whole purpose. Same with your co-authors. When you get a long list of revisions back from a co-author, that's not a co-author being mean. That's a co-author trying to make this paper the best it possibly can be. And until you have that, you lose that defensiveness around all your writing, you're not going to produce your best work.
Exactly. Yeah. And most manuscripts that are sent in that I oversee, and Brian's probably not much different. I've had a fifth revision on one. It's gone to 5 because it was a good paper, but just had a lot of changes. Typically, I will rarely accept a paper until after like the 3rd revision.
Wow.
And really the first revision has some major things that are done. Second revision, you're starting to refine things, and maybe that 3rd revision is just refinement
Right.
of little things. But it's a period of time that this takes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a battle of attrition at sometimes. So,
Yeah.
well, Mark, I really appreciate your time. I think this is going to be really helpful for our students, and hopefully having your point of view, they'll have your voice in the back of their head when they get their first paper either accepted or rejected, and they have to reformat and try again.
Yep. It's all a
Cool.
part of what we are at, or we are. So enjoy.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.